I think a good documentary at the end of it, just if my thing was always if people are talking about it after, they're debating what they saw. Well, is he actually changed, or he seemed a little what do you think about this? That's a great win for me, and I don't even care if it's going to make that much money, because if you can spark that conversation. But you know what? I've always had a problem with Dan. Because people, and you know, I'm not a stickler for like, what should I call you? Call me whatever you want. But then when somebody actually says, "Hey, Dan," I think of like the annoying Dan at the office, like, you know, that just feels like Dan is a type. But I might be wrong. That's maybe just what it's like.
No, but it's funny because names are an interesting thing. I mean, I grew up. Everybody in my family who I haven't seen for years and years still calls me Johnny.
Johnny.
I was Johnny as a child.
Yeah.
And I was Johnny, Jonny, no H.
Okay.
And I always was a stickler for that. I said, I can tell when you're saying Johnny with an H. That's not my name. My name is Johnny without an H. It's Jonny. All my cousins still call me Johnny, and I am uncomfortable with it. When I moved into the world of being a grown-up, I would write John, Jon, and I gave that up after a while and said, no, my name is Jonathan. Yeah. That's my name, and I want to use that. So particularly, and this will resonate with your audience, with film credits, because I was on a film once and I got a credit and it said John Sanger, and I was very upset, and I said I should have told them, you know. Yeah. So on all of my film credits, I make sure it's Jonathan Sanger. Yeah. Now, and I sign my name Jonathan. If someone asks me my name, I say my name's Jonathan Sanger. So that has become rather common for me. But if I am back in New York, or I'm back in Maryland, or I'm with my cousin someplace, all of a sudden,
hey, Johnny.
I'm Johnny again.
Yeah.
And it shocks me a
Do you
little bit because
people,
no, I don't anymore, because there are people who've said it all their lives. Yeah. So I said, all right, the hell with it. Those people can say it, but nobody new is going to say that, because I won't respond to somebody calling me Johnny that I don't know, you know. So
there's actually, you say Johnny. Yeah. That's, you reminded me that the only thing that I probably don't like more than Dan is Danny.
Danny, oh yeah.
That
Danny
just
too.
To me feels like, what am I, your neighborhood 12-year-old Dennis the Menace kind of kid? Danny. Like, Danny boy. Like,
oh, you're Daniel to me. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I may have said Dan occasionally.
No, you always
I think
say
of
Dan.
you as, only because it's Dan Brea is nice, short, easy.
That's true.
But
and Dan Brea actually kind of
it works.
It works. Yeah.
But Daniel Brea does too. And no, it's interesting. Anyway.
It's funny how people become kind of. There's a certain way you call him. Like, I have a good friend who's a very, very established. I don't know if you met him or not. If you haven't, maybe you guys should meet. His name is Michael Lloyd. He's a music producer. He produced the Bee Gees, and he was the youngest vice president of, I believe, MGM Music, back when the surfer sound was taking off, right? So he did the Osmonds and then Barry Manilow and stuff. So he's a very accomplished guy. Lives here in town, and every person who knows him, his name's Michael. Right? Yeah. I have yet to encounter a person, and I've encountered a lot who know him and interact, because he also introduces me to people. It's how I met Larry, and, you know, so you know how it goes in the industry. You meet someone, you meet someone else. Every single person, when they refer to Michael, is Michael Lloyd. I've never heard people just say, well, Michael said. It's always, well, Michael Lloyd said this, Michael Lloyd said that. And it's like it's one name. It's Michael Lloyd.
But there are a lot of people who have like two names as their first, name,
right?
And it could be Michael Lloyd Bernstein or something like that. So it's not so unusual,
right? In this case, that is his last name, but I do. I hear you there. It's just funny how people get like somehow people just say your name a certain way. I don't know if it's because Michael Lloyd flows really nicely or whatever, but I know probably 10 different Michaels, and none of them are first name, last name.
Well, I'm going to get off the name thing now because I want to. I mean, you started with the fact that he's a music producer. I wanted to tell you a story.
Let's dig in.
That is kind of will lead us into a conversation about something I think we might want to talk about. But I did a movie some years ago, which I think you saw, called Down Came a Blackbird
Yeah, love
with
it.
Laura Dern.
Yeah.
And and there was a music producer at Showtime. His name is Spencer Proffer. I don't know if you know the name. Spencer, excellent guy, really wonderful guy. And he did all of the music for all of the Showtime movies. And he particularly did the music for my movie. I mean, he found me a composer who I loved. I mean, I really, really loved the music. But I was interested in music, and so I had ideas. And one of the things I was very interested in was Peter Gabriel's kind of New World music. He had his own company, and he was doing world music. And there was an African musician named Jeffrey Oriema, and he had a song, and I loved that song. I mean, it's I think it's called "The River" was the name of the song. And I for some reason, when I was working on this film, I said, I want to put that song in this movie. I think there's a really good place for it, and it fits. And I contacted Spencer, and he said, "Oh yeah, sure," And he immediately contacted Peter Gabriel, who he knew, and he found this musician, and talked to him, and the musician was willing to let me use the song in the movie. Well, it flipped me out. I mean, I loved it. And I was very pleased that I was able to get something that I wanted, because at the same time, when I made, when I made this movie, another thing I was interested in was the Beatles song, Blackbird,
Sure.
Sitting in the Dead of Night, that whole song.
Great song.
And that
one was harder.
There was no possible way
was too small
I was going to get for a movie
Yeah.
that was actually going to be seen. And,
Yeah.
I mean, Beatles songs are like $1 million a song. You can't
Yeah.
get those songs.
Yeah.
So I knew I couldn't get it, and I didn't. I mean, I wound up, strangely enough, we did get a song in the end credits that Melissa Etheridge wrote and played, because she was friendly with Laura Dern, who was in the movie, and Laura said, I'm going to talk to Melissa and see if she'll do a song for us, and she did, and it was great. So but music, I'm into music. Anyway, out of the blue, I get a call about a week ago from Spencer Proffer, who I haven't talked to in years and years and years. And I mean, he basically had sent me an email saying, it's kind of silly we haven't gotten together in so long, or we haven't talked to each other. I enjoyed working with you many years ago. Okay, great.
And he's
I
here
write
in
him
town,
back.
or
No, he lives here. He lives in LA. So, and he's done a lot of other things beyond the stuff he did for Showtime. Anyway, we finally have a conversation this week, about a week ago, and turns out he's done music documentaries. He had a major deal with Paramount, but because the management is changing, with the Ellisons taking over Paramount, his interest and their interest weren't necessarily aligned, but they let him take all of the music that he had, and he can go anywhere with it, because he's developing dozens of music projects, and mainly documentary films. This is what I wanted to get to, because I want to talk. I think we ought to talk about documentaries.
We haven't done that.
We
Yeah,
never
not
talk
a
about
lot.
documentaries.
Yeah.
Anyway, this guy's doing music documentaries. He did a documentary, and I listened to. I mean, after I contacted him, and I didn't really know what he wanted to talk about, or just other than just reconnecting, which is always good, but or not always good, but in this particular instance was. Anyway, I decided, I should listen to some of his stuff. And I sent him the stuff I've been doing. I've sent him, I told him he should watch Cabrini, he should watch Marshall, he should watch some of the movies I've made in the last few years. Anyway, I listened to some of the work he's done. He did a documentary a few years ago on John Coltrane. Fantastic. He had every major jazz artist you could imagine talking about Coltrane and about Coltrane's influence, and it was all about Coltrane. It was a great and it's a full-length feature documentary. He also did a documentary called The Day the Music Died, which is about Don McLean, who wrote the song, which, although you're looking like you don't know it, if you heard it, you would know it. It's took my Chevy to the levee.
Oh, I know
levee
that song.
was
That song. Yeah, the day the music.
The day the music died.
Yeah.
And how that song was kind of emblematic of a whole generation of us who grew up in the '60s, late '60s, and about it was about the war, the Vietnam War. It was about the death of Richie Valens and Buddy Holly. I mean, the day the music died specifically was the day when Buddy Holly, Richie Valens, and the Big Bopper, three musicians, were killed in a plane crash after a concert that they had done, and that somehow emblematically became known as the day the music died. So that's how the song begins, but then the song goes on to talk about other things. It talks about, essentially it's about the death of Kennedy and of John Kennedy and Bobby Kennedy and Martin Luther King and all of the things that were going on at the time. Anyway, he did this documentary, very good documentary. He also did a documentary about Elvis. And so he's done these music documentaries that are really, really good. And he tends to have excellent relationships with all of the musicians because he himself was a musician and played in a band, and he knows musicians. And so
now, when you say he's done them, is he doing the music for them, or he's actually producing these projects?
No, he's producing these.
So he's a film producer
these
too.
These are not. I mean, he started out as just a music producer, but he's become a producer. He produces everything.
Yeah. Okay.
And anyway, he's got a whole array of other music documentaries and that he's in. Maybe not just music, but interesting documentaries that he wants to do. And we had a conversation. We talked about it, and he knows that I'm in the feature world, but that he's in the documentary world. He's not looking for money. He's got plenty of money to make these things. He's looking for, but he has never ever been in a situation where he wasn't enveloped by a company that would just put them out. So he never had to worry about where they were going to play. Are they
make it?
Now he's got to take the things he makes and bring them to streamers, bring them to other places. And in any event, what he said to me, he says, "Look, he's about my age," and he said, I made a list of 10 people in this industry that I would like to work with. And I don't want to work with anybody I don't like anymore. I've worked with a lot of people who are assholes, and I don't want to do that. But you were on my list, and I just thought I'd reconnect with you. So I said, "Oh, that's lovely,
Yeah.
And I said, "I really enjoyed working with you." He said, "Well, let's get together and talk about what we're doing. Maybe there's some."
You should have told him,
interest.
"Hey, actually, I have a list of your shit list of people that I never want to work with again, and you were on that list. So how great is that?"
No, actually, I would share the shit list with him to make sure we had a lot of the same
Right.
people we don't want to work with.
Right, perfect.
But
okay,
but he's a guy I mentioned him only. I mean, in this respect, because we're going to meet next week. We're going to have lunch. We're going to talk about projects. And
do you think you might do a narrative version of one of the docs, or what do you think?
Well, I don't know. No, I don't know that I want to do necessarily a feature version of a doc. I'm interested in documentaries too, and I know you've been in that world. And I thought, okay, and I thought before he came in here today, let's talk about documentaries. We don't do that. So this was an introduction to it, because music. I mean, there are a lot of music documentaries. Some are great, some are really good. I mean, right now there's a documentary that I saw recently about Billy Joel, which is on, I think, Netflix. It's terrific, really, really good. I think there's. I went to see the Neil Diamond Show, which is essentially a Broadway type show, but it could be a documentary. I mean, it's the life of Neil Diamond, how he got to be what he was, and all these things. There was one on. Just trying to think of the name, Tapestry, the fantastic female, there's so many really good musicians, I mean, James Taylor, I'm sure, would be you could do a documentary about him. Not necessarily, I'm not necessarily talking only about doing documentaries about one individual or one band, but I'm fascinated, I love good music, and I want to see what else he's up to.
So do you think whatever you do with him is going to be musically driven in one way or another?
I'm not sure. No, this is open-ended. I think if he's interested in the kinds of things I'm doing, and I'm interested in the kind of thing. I mean, for example, I did Marshall. Now, when I did Marshall, I needed a song for Marshall, and we were able to reach Diane Warren, who's legendary songwriter, who has been nominated for 13 Academy Awards. I mean, she's amazing. She's and she writes great songs. And she loved the movie, and she wrote a song for the movie. We got a great artist. She did, actually. She got a fantastic artist, Andra Day, to sing the song in the movie in the end credits. And when she was talking about the song to Common, who she had met. Common wanted to write a rap around the song that she could actually include in the song. So the two of them collaborated on that, and that's also part of the song. Anyway,
Cool. That's cool.
turns out that Spencer's a good friend of Diane's. Diane is an extraordinary musician and writer. She's written songs for many, many movies. I would love to work with her again. So
Would this be your first like full documentary that you produce for yourself, front to back, or
Not necessarily. No, I've done other. I started in documentaries before I ever got to features. I made documentaries back in the day,
Yeah,
and that was my interest. I was interested in making. I was interested in making movies about real events that were documentaries, and it was only from that I moved into making fictional movies about real people too, which is another aspect of what I do.
I came at it the opposite way, but I was my first real completely do it myself project was a documentary just by happenstance, and I'm actually really happy it happened that way, because I think you just learn so much when you do a documentary, because it's this blend of guerrilla, traditional storytelling, journalism, and whatever. And what I like the most about documentary work is that it never ends up the way you think, because you have a plan, you have a script or an outline of what you want it to be. But if you really have good conversations with your subjects and you really dig deep, you start uncovering things that you couldn't have possibly even planned for, and then that leads you down.
Look, you're 100% correct, and I agree with you. And it's the excitement of doing documentaries. I'm actually involved in a documentary now that a friend of mine who wrote a fictional movie and directed it, Jamal Joseph, wrote
chapter and verse.
Yeah, chapter and verse. Jamal is doing a documentary about Abby Hoffman, and it's a deep dive into Abby Hoffman, who was a major anti-war figure here, and kind of he was a funny, interesting character. He wasn't, as serious as the subject was. He was serious about his aims, but his methods were funny, and he did a lot of interesting things. Anyway, I'm helping to see about getting that made. So all of these things are converging, and I thought I would like to work on, and that certainly isn't a music documentary per se, but it is about a period of America in the 60s, which was filled with very, very significant all kinds of music. You could think of songs like Abraham, Martin, and John, or, not every song, or all of the Bob Dylan stuff, a lot of it which was very much anti-war, that kind of stuff. But I'm not specifically looking for a soapbox. I'm just looking for really good material.
Do you take the same
people.
approach that you do with scripted films, where you kind of just try to find a good story and then kind of figure out if it has potential commercial appeal, if it's even worth doing as a film, what the kind of selling point is and stuff at all, or do you? Because documentaries notoriously are a little bit harder to make money with. Films are already hard to make money with.
They're harder to make money with, but the way Spencer has worked is he makes them for a very, low budget compared to feature films, and he pre-sells them in such a way that he makes it a very low-risk proposition for anybody who wants to invest, because you could come in and basically the budget's covered, and anything else is gravy, if it does well. So, I know documentary is, it's hard, and there are few documentarians who are really successful. The Michael Moores of the world who are making lots of money.
Basically, Ken Burns, Walt, the German.
Werner
Herzog and
Michael Moore.
Yeah.
No, those are the big ones.
Yeah.
But and they also make bigger. Their documentaries can be very expensive too. But in any event, I like the form, and one of the things about the form that I think you immediately mentioned, and I think it's the most important thing, is that you start with an idea, but you don't really know where the idea is going to go, and you don't know. I mean, you have a rough idea of where you're beginning and where you're ending, but there are new discoveries to be made almost every interview you do.
And this is where the raw talent of the filmmaking and the storytelling comes in, and I think the challenge that I like about it is that there is no way. You can't create a script. You're not going to be working with actors unless you're doing National Geographic historic documentary where everything's reenactments and you have Morgan Freeman talking about what happened.
Yeah.
Great, script it. But that's not the kind of film we're talking about.
No, exactly. Right.
You can't predict what's going to happen, and so you have to rely on your instincts and just figure, I know how to tell a story. I'm going to have to let this thing unfold and just figure out how to piece this thing together as you go. And sometimes that means you got to go. That's why documentaries can take 3 years to make, 5 years to make, because you got to go back and.
Well, one of the reasons why I'm kind of fascinated with the form also is the fact that when I'm doing a feature, I'm always looking for a happy accident. I'm looking for something that I didn't expect. If I'm just taking the script and delivering it exactly as it is, and I hear the words one way, and that's the way I want the actor to do it, to me that's kind of dull. That's not exciting. What's exciting is when an actor will come up with a moment that you hadn't even imagined, and it makes the process more exciting. Well, the cool thing about documentaries is that's all about what it is. Everything is like that.
Yeah.
So that you do an interview, you don't really know where it's going. If you ask good questions, you wind up maybe getting a story that you never imagined you would get. Yes, it can take a lot longer. You have to go through tons of material. I'm currently doing a documentary right now. You asked about documentaries. I'm doing a documentary with a friend of mine who worked with Michael Moore. I think you met him. His name Chris Hensey. But Chris is doing a documentary with me, and it's called Wise Women, and it's about older women and the fact that older women should be running the world. I mean, that's what the movie's about. It is. I mean, it's really. It was started as a kind of more medical in the sense that it was about menopause, and menopause is a very current subject right now. The whole sense of menopause, but this isn't just about the fact that women go through menopause. It's about the fact that when women go through menopause, historically. There's been a kind of a sense that now they're good to be grandmothers and they can take care of younger kids. I mean, thinking of women that way, and very limiting to women, to what women do. It's called the grandmother hypothesis, which means now that you are not having children anymore and you're out of your child rearing days, you
kids,
have a new purpose. You can take care of other people's kids or your own, your own grandkids. Well, we have come up with a hypothesis, or Chris has, which is called the wise woman hypothesis, which indicates that that menopause itself was an adaptation, and it only exists in humans and in some apes, but it doesn't exist. Very few animals go through menopause.
Oh.
It's not a common thing, but it makes sense when you look at it anthropologically and historically, that it was an opportunity for women to become not less important but more important, because they didn't need they didn't they were past child rearing. Now they could concentrate on the world, on everything else that needed to be concentrated on. So the documentary really goes through all of the different possibilities. I think it's very female empowering. But it's meant to be.
The important thing in a documentary I found, and maybe this is true for all movies, but specifically in documentaries, I think for them to work, you do really benefit from having a strong perspective from one side. Whenever you see a documentary that tries to just kind of like
just tell both.
It doesn't end up being very interesting. But now you can make a very strong argument.
No, I agree with you. And I mean, part of the story, of course, is also listening to people who may not totally agree with it, but have reasonable, some kind of reasonable argument to bounce against.
What I learned after my first documentary, I learned so much on that. So that's why I bring that one up so much. The Escape from Room 18, that documentary about the former Jewish neo-Nazi John Daly and all that. And going into that, I had a very specific angle on it. This was, and also how we were pitching it and getting some funding for it. The whole premise around it was like, this is a shock doc. It's a Jewish neo-Nazi skinhead. It's like Ryan Gosling had a movie called The Believer, which did okay, but not, but that's where he was like a guy with Jewish roots that was turned into a skinhead. So we're like, this is the real thing.
Okay.
And then it was also like, we were going to cover this moment. This is how it came up, where this guy, John, who I knew from back when, hit me up and he said, look, I got contacted by, I'm not going to go into the whole detail of the movie. You guys can Google Escape from Room 18, but I've been invited to Eastern Europe with one of these guys who I used to run with in these gangs. Like, he found me here and asked me if we could meet to make amends for our past. Now, this could be two things. One, they're all out of prison now and they're going to try and finish the job because they did try to kill him. Or two, and now they're probably even less happy with him because they just spent 15 years in prison or what have you. Or it's true, and then it's going to be a very interesting reflection on the past. So we were pitching it as like, well, we're not going to know, or we're going to get ambushed, or we not. And what it ended up turning into, John, the main subject, has a brain tumor, presumably from the beating, right, when they tried to kill him. And I read the depositions. It was pretty gruesome. It actually sparked the Hate Crimes Act in Florida, so it was a big deal. The ADL was involved, the government, all that stuff. So they flew him to Israel and hit him there, which was also headline news in Israel, where the Jerusalem Post was writing, the neo-Nazi seeks asylum in Israel and was granted, and so there was this huge controversy around him even coming there. But what it turned into, so we didn't really know what was going to happen. What it turned into was like, he has a brain tumor, and the other guy, Kevin, who hit him up, one of the reasons he had hit him up was because he was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, and so there were two very sick men, physically sick men, reflecting on all these crazy things that they did in the past at Auschwitz and Theresienstadt, and these internment and concentration camps, with these really emotional moments in between where they're suddenly standing face to face with the reality of what they were hawking and pushing and enforcing, and they're both just broken physically and mentally. And so it turned into a very emotional human story about humans and self-preservation and how these kids get pulled into, these disenfranchised kids who are basically nerds that are getting bullied and beat up in school, and then the skinheads come around and say, hey, look, you don't have to deal with this. We got you. You'll never be beat up again. You'll be feared. You'll be respected. And so the whole but you have to be an anti-Semite and basically, try and kill black people, everybody. That kind of just doesn't sound so important when you just got your ass kicked.
When you're being empowered.
And your parents aren't around, and your great big brother's a drug addict, and so you go with it. And then you're in, and God forbid you're like, oh, hey guys, by the way, just kidding. I'm actually Jewish, so I'm gonna go ahead and not do this. Too late. So it was this really emotional thing, which completely shifted the tone as we're making it. And while this is happening, I'm thinking to myself, shoot, my backers on this project, I don't know if they're going to be happy or not, but this is not at all the story that I pitched. Not at all. There's nothing shock doc about this. This is sad and emotional, and I mean, I believe you might have seen it or maybe not, but I learned that as long as you can turn that story into something that when people watch it, it moves them, and it does. This is the point I was trying to make. I got a little lost. I think a good documentary at the end of it, my thing was always, if people are talking about it after, they're debating what they saw. Well, is he actually changed, or he seemed a little, what do you think about this? That's a great win for me, and I don't even care if it's going to make that much money, because if you can spark that conversation.
I agree with you. I think that's what you're looking for. I mean, I think what's fascinating is what you said, is that when you went into doing this, you probably didn't know how it was going to turn out. You didn't know this much about these guys. I'll give you another example of that, which to me was a classic documentary, and I can't think of the name of it exactly, but it was the documentary about Lance Armstrong. The guy who made it was making a positive documentary about this hero, Lance Armstrong, and in the course of making the documentary, finds out that he was doping, and he's got to now do I want to just abandon the documentary, or do I want to make it something bigger? And I don't know who it was. I can't think of his name, but he's a famous, he's a pretty famous documentarian, and he really took the idea and took it and completely turned it inside out. You started with a hero who turned out to be the goat. I mean, turned out to be not the goat, the bad guy in a way, because he was doing something. Now he claims everyone was doing it, but that's not the point.
Yeah.
The point is, all of his fame was resting on cheating.
Yeah.
And it was all about that. And so the whole documentary shifted in the course of making it to a totally different thing.
Which is super interesting.
Yeah, no, it's
because
great.
if that's happening to you as a filmmaker, the audience is going to be even more surprised.
Yeah, I think
it's
so.
like The Jinx. I don't know if you saw that series. It's a documentary series about Robert Durst, the guy,
yeah.
right? So that's an example of probably people. I forget the origin story, but I think Robert Durst had reached out because Magnolia made a feature about Durst or something being accused of killing his ex-wife or his wife or something. But I think the documentary wasn't like they didn't. I don't think they knew that in the process of making,
that he was going to get
that he was good. While they're filming the documentary, this guy goes to the bathroom with his mic on and talks to himself and confesses all the crimes.
Yeah.
Well, of course I killed him. I killed them all.
Yeah.
If I'm sitting there and the guy says, "Oh, well, I just got to go to the bathroom," and I'm just sitting there and, oh, hey, still rolling, which is normally a mistake, right?
Yeah, but it happens.
You left it on, and then suddenly that voice comes through. I mean, I'm just, I know this is gonna be crazy. Those are those little things that you score with on a documentary.
Well, look, I mean,
my version of that was in the documentary that I made. At the end, this is actually a really good thing to bring this all together. We went through all these. There were so many things. So 2 points I'll make here. One, making that documentary made me realize that I'm not trying to be a biased journalist. I want to make documentaries, and if you want to do it, that's fine. But like I feel like a good documentary is true to the story it's telling, and not necessarily true to the story of the filmmaker who wants to position it a certain way. It just turns out better if you follow the real storyline. And so what I was doing, because when I realized the shock thing wasn't really working out that way, there were, at the time of filming, there was already a lot of like missiles launching from Gaza and stuff. So while we were doing the interviews in Israel, because that's where he lived, right, we were going to bomb shelters all the time. So we actually went to the border and filmed some of the missile launches and filmed some of the impacts. And what I was going to do is draw parallels between how terrorist organizations recruit in similar ways to neo-Nazis, and that the fundamental mindset of any organization that takes youth and turns them into some kind of a propaganda machine to enforce their thing, they all function the same way. They look for underserved, disenfranchised people, give them power, educate them on doctrines that are very strict and biased and hateful, and then turn them into soldiers for the cause. And so I was going to create that narrative, and then in the process I realized this, I'm trying to tell my opinion of the world, and I'm trying to educate
let the world tell me rather than me
exactly.
No.
So then we followed John, and then at the end of it, right in the last thing that we did after we got back from Prague and Poland and everything, and that whole escapade was done, we're sitting. We said, okay, there's one final thing I want to do. I want to film like a Shabbat dinner, a Friday dinner with John, his mother, her sister. She's a twin sister, and I just want them to sit there and talk about the experience of having gone there and the childhood and all that stuff. In that interview, and I'm sitting there, and it's just me, the team had all gone, it's just me
and
with set up cameras.
Go.
And I said, all right, so just have dinner and talk. And then while that's going on, I'm thinking, wow, I don't even know how to stitch this all together. So I was trying to think of things to cue them with, but before I opened my mouth, John just looked up at his mom at one point and said, have I ever apologized to you? And then that turns into this really, and then she goes, no. And she starts crying, and he goes up to her and says, I'm sorry. And they did this big hug. And I'm sitting there like, yes, I know how the movie ends because.
And you didn't, you didn't anticipate this.
I didn't, but I had my ending. I had my ending. And so now I could say, now all I need to do is like lead to that.
Yes.
Just I had some kind of a benchmark,
Yes.
either a great beginning or a great ending, but nothing was working out. But now I had the ending. I knew that was how could you end anything on anything other than that? So now I knew I could construct the story to just
Well, those are
go to
great.
that.
Those are great moments. I mean,
Yeah.
I think of other documentaries like Errol Morris, who's a great documentarian, who did what the Thin Red Line was it, or
Yeah,
and,
yeah,
and wound up getting a man exonerated for a crime that he was in prison for
yeah,
life
it's crazy.
as a result of information that came out of that documentary. I mean, those kind of things, you don't get those things happening often with feature films. Those are
No.
things that you say, oh my God, this film actually had a major effect on somebody's life that you couldn't ever have anticipated when you started it. The idea of the film and the filmmaker, and he talked about it, was not, he wasn't looking to free this guy. He just was
Yeah.
looking to find out a little bit about him. And he,
Isn't
he's
that
made
something?
other movies that are pretty interesting. I'll tell you one of them. Funny story. Years ago, a woman comes to me through, I don't know exactly how it happened, and I'm trying to remember her name. But in any event, this woman comes to me and says, "Look, I have a story, and it's my story, and no one wants to tell it. You made the movie Francis, and I love that movie, and I think you need to tell my story." And she starts telling me. I mean, she initially calls me on the phone. I don't know how she got my number. We have this conversation, and turns out she was a beauty queen in Texas, I think, or in the South. I'm not exactly sure where, and rather intelligent. She winds up falling for this guy in Utah who's a Mormon, and the Mormon community tries to keep her from him, and they run away. Her story. They run away, and they're in England, and they become a couple. They're sleeping together. She loves him. He apparently loves her. One day, while she's out, this Mormon vigilante group came and recaptures this guy, and gets her arrested for having kidnapped him. And
Jeez.
he does, and it's in all of the it's in all the tabloids and everything about the fact that and lurid details about that she raped him, that he was captive, and that which is an unusual switch on the fact that you don't usually imagine women raping men in the way that men rape women, although there's no reason why it couldn't happen, but you kind of imagine, well, could he get it up? Well, how do you do? What are the mechanics of it? Things like that. But nevertheless, she gets arrested. He gets away, and he gets taken back to his home, and reintegrated with his Mormon family, and she is a pariah because they said, even though she winds up getting out of prison and goes home. Anyway, it's years later now, and the story has been told from the standpoint of the guy being captured and all of the things that had happened, and she feels no one's ever told her story.
That's
so
crazy.
she wants her story told.
Yeah.
She's talking to me, and I'm all right. I'm interested. I don't know exactly what I'm going to do with it. I don't. She's not looking to do a documentary. She wants to have a feature film written about her. Okay. And she's a bit of a wacko. I mean, I have to say, because I would get called from her 4 times a day. Sometimes. I mean, I'd get these phone calls, and I finally had to change my. I had to take her off the list so that anytime she called, and she kept changing numbers on me, so she was constantly trying to reach me.
Wow.
In the meantime, she calls me one day and she says, "Well, somebody's going to make a documentary about me, and this will be great. This will be really interesting." So I said, "Oh, great! I'm delighted. I'm off the hook."
Good
I'm
for you.
thinking I don't have to
Yeah.
do it. A major filmmaker, Errol Morris, is going to do a documentary about me. And he does. And the documentary is called Tabloid. It's one of Errol Morris's documentaries. You can look it up. It's all about this woman, and there are other aspects of her. She's an animal lover. and she loved her puppy that was dying, and she was the first person. She went to Korea, not to eat the dog.
I was gonna.
No, but to have the dog cloned, and it was the first time she cloned her puppy so that she could have the same exact dog.
I didn't even know you could do that.
Again,
Right.
you can do that, and I mean it may be against the law, but it can be done. That's all I'm saying. So she's involved in all of these weird things.
Yeah.
And I had, completely abandoned contact. I wasn't talking to her. And I'm doing a screening downtown. I think it was of Marshall. I had a screening in an old theater one day, and she's living in the South. I know that. This woman comes in, blonde woman, kind of, I mean, you could imagine that she might have been very attractive when she was younger. She's now probably in her 50s. And she asks for me, and she comes over to me, Joyce McKinney. Says, my name's Joyce McKinney. I'm thinking, Joyce McKinney, how do I know? Says, you know Joyce McKinney, the woman who told you the story. I'm Joyce. She had said she took a trip, and she heard about this movie, and she wanted to see it, and she wanted to meet me. Well, it made me very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I said, people stalking you.
That's quite an endeavor.
For whatever reason, I don't know where she comes from. I don't know what she's
Yeah.
doing. I said, thank you very much. Great to meet you. We'll talk sometime. I'm busy with the movie, and it ended. Don't know what happened to her immediately after that, but I realized. In the meantime, this was actually before the movie that Errol Morris made. Errol Morris makes the movie. She calls me up. The movie hasn't come out yet. She said, he lied to me. I said, what are you talking about? She says, well, he made fun of me. I mean, he didn't tell my story the way I wanted it told.
Exploited her.
He told the story the way he saw the story, which was completely. So I said, look, Joyce, you must have given him the right because, she said, well, I signed over the right. I thought he,
Read the contract.
I said, I'm sorry, but you got to read the contract. I mean, he has no obligation to do it your way. He made the movie he made. And meantime, I haven't seen the movie. and I'm trying, I don't know how she got me again, but it was kind of weird. And I'm now, around that time, I'm in New York, and the movie's playing in the Village at the Waverly Theater, which is a really classy place that they show a lot of good documentaries. The movie's playing, so I go in to see the movie. I'm sitting with my wife seeing the movie, and she says, did you turn your phone? Your phone's ringing as the movie is on. I look on my phone. Joyce McKinney is calling me
while
I'm watching the movie about her.
Yeah.
Well, it really freaked me out. I turned it off, and I said, Carla, I told my wife, I said, I have to get this person out of my life. I mean, I can't do anything for her, and this is too much. And I did everything I could to erase any signs so she couldn't. I mean, not that I'm that hard to find, but nevertheless, I made sure I never answered any calls when she called me, or when I knew once I knew who it was, I decided I didn't want to have any more contact with her. Not because, first of all, I wasn't particularly interested in going down that
well, that's a lot, and that's really uncomfortable. You don't know what people are capable of.
But it's funny how these stories,
especially if she's a rapist of men.
Well, you don't know.
Right?
That's what it said she was.
Yeah.
And then now, the latest thing that and then again, a year or so goes by, and I find out that she was in the neighborhood where I live, somewhere in the neighborhood, in a car, and she ran over someone and took off, and they caught her.
Good
and
Lord.
and she killed him. I mean, somebody that she didn't, she ran somebody down, and wound up going to jail for that. I don't know
intentionally or an accident, or you don't know. Right?
The articles about it said that it might have been an accident, but it was it was.
The man looked a lot like producer Jonathan Sanger.
Egregious accident. So I said,
right.
Holy, really, why? But I mean, I don't know why I got off on a tangent.
Telling the story that actually,
her.
Well, it kind of ties into like being true to the story. Now, in this case, I guess I would have to say that that there is that side of it too. You're a filmmaker and you have this very eccentric character. I mean, I'm sure Robert Durst with the
Yes.
Jinx would have loved the story to be told his way, but in this case, the documentary's better for it if
No,
it wasn't.
and by the way, I mean, I never ever even took a position on what was the reality of her real story because it was so bizarre anyway.
Yeah.
It was interesting, and bizarre, but I didn't take a position as to whether she did or didn't do what she said she did.
Now,
what they said she did.
When you, because this is one of my recurring debates with people that I coach or even for my own stuff. There are a lot of stories, like Marshall,
Yeah.
like Cabrini,
Yeah.
like this lady,
Yeah.
the person I did a documentary
Yeah,
on, the one we're
sure.
talking about. That could be documentaries, they could be
Yeah.
features, they could be whatever. What do you use kind of in your head to decide if it's a documentary or a feature? Like Marshall could have easily been a documentary.
Well, it could have been, except that there was a story there that transcended just the simple documentary facts, because it was the real story was a black man was arrested and convicted. He had been living as a hand in the house of this white woman, and he was being arrested for having raped her, and he claimed that it was consensual. It was at a time when a black man and a white woman would have been a bit of a shock anyway. Certainly in the South it would have,
Right.
and even in the North. What's interesting about this story is it happened in the North at a time in the late 40s or early 40s, 1940s, and it was very hard to convince a jury. Normally, it would be very hard to convince a jury that a white woman wanted this to happen. And she, I mean, there was a really good case to be made against this guy, and he won. It was unusual, and he won because he had a great lawyer who defended him and helped him, and the great lawyer happened to be.
So because the movie wasn't about the life of Thurgood Marshall, it was about that little.
It wasn't about the life.
Okay,
of
let's
Thurgood
do a
Marshall.
different
So it
one.
was a story.
Francis.
Francis again. Now Francis was more of a longitudinal story, so it goes from her as a child to almost to her.
But isn't that a good
late
documentary either? Like
It could easily have been. You could have done a documentary about her, but this is long after the woman had died, and
so you feel like
most
just
of
a
the people
documentary
in the
about
story,
it wouldn't have been the same.
No, and the thing is, initially the way it was developed was not essentially meant to be just a documentary of Francis Farmer. It became that in the course of the development of it, but it was literally about her and her relationship with one other person, which kind of fell away as the story. So we wound
And it
up
had
with a
been
story.
written as a script already. That's how it was introduced to you, right?
Well,
So,
I developed the script.
Did you? Okay.
I developed the script from the story of her, but I had read a number of different versions of her story, and I thought, this is an interesting story about a woman ahead of her time, a woman out of her time. She was, which is in some way a lot like Marshall. I mean, that happened in spite of his time.
Yeah.
What happened to Frances happened because of her time. She was somebody that, being a strong woman that she seemed to have been, was constantly held against her. She was being, no one wanted to believe her or believe any of the things that she believed in, and and in any event, but there was a story there. Now I can't say that I wouldn't have been interested in doing a documentary, but at that time in my career, for sure, I wasn't even thinking about it as a documentary. I was thinking of stories that interested me and that had a dramatic through line. And there was a major dramatic through line.
And then at the time you were focused on films. You would just come off of this
Absolutely.
great success with
Elephant Man, sure.
Yeah, of course.
And I mean, even Elephant Man, there are documentaries about it.
Yeah.
There were documentaries mostly that have been made since the movie, but and I'm all for it. I'm all for documentaries telling true details about stories like that. For me, that was just a great.
Yeah.
The story was I loved, and so I was moved by it enough to want to make it as a feature.
I think maybe sometimes as humans we overthink and we feel like we want to know what the right thing to do is. Like what's the best way to XYZ, but I mean, reality of it is
there isn't any one way. You could do all of those things, and many have. I mean, you see plays that are great. I mean, the play of the Atticus Finch, and the Scout, and the wonderful movie that was made by Robert Mulligan years ago about now I'm forgetting the name of it, but they made a movie. They recently made a play. The play was successful. The movie was successful. There could be an opera made from it. There could be many different iterations of any individual story, and I'm all for them. I mean, if somebody wants to do an opera called The Elephant Man about that story,
that'd be a great opera.
It would be great. Yeah. It would be fantastic, and there are lots of opportunities for those kinds of things. Francis too. So you don't know. I mean,
that's true.
I'm interested in. I tend, but because I tend to be interested in stories about real people, even as feature films, it might go to the point that I'm also interested in real stories that are documentaries about real people. I'm fascinated with.
You ever considered like a parallel production, like doing a documentary and a film at the same time?
I do. In fact, right now I'm developing a project about Frederick Douglass. Now, Frederick Douglass was a famous orator, black orator, came out of slavery, escaped slavery, lived to be about 90 years old, was a huge fighter, anti-slavery fighter, fascinating character, very long, interesting life. I'm doing a movie, but it's not about his whole life. It's only about one little slice of his life. One time in his life, after he had gotten out of slavery, he wrote an autobiography. And
he went to Ireland or something.
His autobiography became famous, and it made him famous, but being famous also made him a target. They could find out where he was, they knew what he was doing, he was lecturing about his book. It was very likely that slave catchers were going to, which there was an act that was passed by Congress that allowed slave catchers from the South to go north and steal back their property because he was somebody's property in that sense. Chattel slavery, that's what it is. So he winds up going to England and Ireland, and he's only planning to be in Ireland a brief time, and he stays in Ireland for 4 weeks, and our story is just about that period of time.
So then you thought, well, if we do a documentary that shows the whole story...
I could do a documentary, and we are thinking about the potential of doing a documentary about his larger life and other aspects of his life, but at the moment we're concentrating on the feature, which is the first thing we plan to do. But yes, as you say, they're not mutually exclusive. You can do you can do multiple things about any one of these characters, and great stories can be made that way. I think of a movie like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, a great movie. It's a fictional story, of course, but it could have been a real story. It could have been about a real person, and somebody might have, McMurphy, the character that is played by Jack Nicholson in the movie, could have been a real person, and somebody might have seen that story about somebody who was lobotomized or whatever it is, and say, "Oh, let's create this as a movie."
Well, same with Francis, like that whole concept of how society was thinking, we need to fix her brain, and we're lobotomizing him, and that in and of itself could be a documentary on how people were treating mental illness.
Of course. Well, it's true.
It wasn't even illness. It's just like anybody who thinks not like you, something must be wrong. Let's fry their brain.
Let's do something to their brain to calm them down.
And this is crazy because this is like in our lifetimes. Like this is not even some 200-year-old weird medical practice. This was modern.
This was very, very modern.
Yeah.
I mean, these, but I mean, anyway, getting back to documentaries, a lot of it came to me recently through music documentaries, because I love good music, and there's some great music documentaries. There was the one that Questlove did about the Summer of Love, which is a terrific documentary about the music of that time. There are a lot of good ones, and not all of them hold up as like 90-minute or 2-hour documentaries. Sometimes
I do think some
they're
documentaries, especially when they're about bigger people, like the Bob Marley one and stuff, they do take liberties and go on for too long. I feel like there's no need to have a 2.5 hour long documentary usually,
Probably not.
in my opinion. But maybe that already is kind of a mini series, if you ask me. But
well, that may be. I mean, I think. Well, that's another thing. We can talk about the length of movies and the fact that, I mean, we see serious movies that are being made at 3 hours, 3.5 hours. I mean, is it necessary, or is it a different order of artistic achievement? Maybe it's something different than
it's almost
than
like
the
they shouldn't be
90-minute
called
movies.
feature films. It should just be called production
Marathons.
Yeah, yeah. Tarantino's new marathon, The Hateful Eight. Yeah.
But again, if something really holds a major audience's interest for any particular length of time, I don't have a big problem with it. I mean, the whole point of making a movie shorter is to hold your interest for as long as it can, and then let you go.
Yeah.
And some projects do, some projects don't. Some projects are too long, and your interest isn't held, and you realize when you've seen it that same story could have been told more economically and better.
Yeah, that's
perhaps.
why I don't like hang around films like the Licorice Pizza and stuff. And I mean, I respect it for what it was. I don't know if you saw the movie or not, but
That's a long time ago, wasn't it?
There was a recent one.
Licorice Pizza.
Yeah, it was about like the record. It was It kind of came and went, but there was a little bit of hype around it as for an indie film and stuff, and it's just the type of film that puts you in a San Fernando Valley vibe, and the whatever the year was, 70 something or what have you, and it's all Licorice Pizza. It's about records, and all that stuff, and it just makes a point to draw out the vibe. And so you're sitting and listening in, bickering conversations and this and that, where there's not a storyline really being moved forward. It's just like trying to put you in that space. And I understand that to a degree, but at the same time, I feel like when Tarantino does it, it's a little bit different, because he has long scenes where there's conversation happening about wait for the cream, that la crème and all that stuff, and like Inglourious Basterds, that are completely unnecessary to move the story along. But it works there because his films are so focused on characters, and it's fun, and it's well written, and it's full of humor and wit. But it's so hard to keep someone's...
You just made me think of the Burger Royale scene. And
that was so unnecessary. Jackson and Travolta could have gone in there. Yes. Shot those guys, walked away with the briefcase.
No, but they're talking about what
that is a tasty burger. What is this? Big Kahuna burger. All right, but in those, if you're a master at that,
those are great character scenes. They are.
That's right.
They're great character scenes. They do tell us a little bit about the characters in certain ways. I mean, we think of great scenes that way in other movies. The classic scene with Jack Nicholson and Five Easy Pieces, which I think we talked about, where he's trying to get a sandwich without but don't put any lettuce on. No, we only it only comes this way, and he tells her to take leave the bread and put it between your knees. I mean, he goes and it becomes an extraordinarily character revealing scene that is very, very, very iconic and funny. And those are some of the great scenes.
They are.
You think about Diner talking about, are you going to eat that? No, I'm not. Can I? I mean,
don't eat that cornbread, or what was that? I think that was in like Green Mile or something. But
but I mean, those are some of the wonderful character references that make us feel that we're watching something that's real, as opposed to just.
But it is a balance, right?
The bouncing
because
ball.
Then suddenly you get too into that stuff, and then you end up with something where you're like, okay, what we get the characters, like what What's happening? And then you realize the film doesn't really have Nora, again, going back to that movie. Again, hats off. Great job with all the success and all that. But like, let's take Nora as an example. The second act, like, could have been 30 minutes shorter. And literally nothing would have changed about the story. So how much do we need to see the same people hanging around, driving around? Oh, here's another thing. Here's another funny thing to do with the Armenian guys. Like,
well, I mean, no, and I would have to agree with you there. I thought that the search for the guy that she has married, which was that whole scene, you go from place to place to place where he might have been, all these different places. It was way too long. I mean, there were good, very interesting character moments in there, but you weren't really advancing anything much. And if you cut two of them out, wouldn't have made any difference.
Because when you think about it from a high level plot, it was, well, she thought they were a thing, and he obviously is just some stupid kid who ran off and doesn't have responsibilities, so now he's gone. But like, this isn't the treasure hunt for the lost, the Templars' treasure or something. It's we know what it is,
and
so
we know we're gonna find him.
Yeah, we know we're gonna find it. So do a montage, did 30 seconds, and get to it. And then you have a nice 90-minute movie, and everybody, would probably.
Well, see, now I would argue that that to make the movie artistically relevant for the filmmaker, he wanted, it would be more than that. It would be more than just a montage, but not necessarily 5 separate scenes that could have been done in 2 scenes. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily have taken as much out of it, perhaps, as you might have, as a storyteller. But that's.
But you know me, I would have taken that movie. I would have raised the stakes. I would have made his parents real oligarchs, and they put a hit out on her, and like I would have done the whole John Wick thing with it.
They're gonna kill her, to get her out of his life.
And then she really, she insidiously, she got married, but she did it in a way where now she actually owns all this stuff and fucks him over.
Well, look, I mean,
well, that's what I want to see.
As they say in England, horses for courses. It depends on what you want to do. That's a different movie. That's a very different movie, and that was not obviously what this filmmaker was after. And in fact, I remember watching that movie and waiting for the violence to occur, thinking it was gonna be there, and then you realize, no, these aren't guys who want to kill her. They just want to get her out of his life, and that all of the anticipation for what could happen from that setup doesn't occur. Yeah. It isn't the obvious. It's a little different, and I don't know. That to me, I mean, the only violence was her against them, not them against her. They didn't do much except hold her.
Yeah, that's true. She actually broke the guy's nose and all that. Yeah, which is nice. Feisty, but then I don't know. It left me a little.
No, I understand.
But whatever.
But you're looking, But then perhaps you were looking at a different.
I'm looking at it as
thought the movie
that's exactly right. And look, I'm not a fan of French films, and you know that. Or what I mean by French films is slow burns, no real structured arc. I mean, but then you look at things like 400 Blows, and it's a great movie. I wouldn't make that movie, but I respect it for what it is, because it is one of those things where you can say, you know what, that's a slice of childhood that we can kind of relate to, and it's about a kid, and then a kid, there's nothing like that's going on.
And look, the end of the movie is an iconic moment. It isn't necessarily the kind of end you want. You want to see somebody either killed or somebody who,
But it is sort of the imagery with the sea and him
he's
there.
He's gone as far as he can go, and he's looking out, and there's nothing. There's an ocean, and he, it's childhood's end. Bam, what is it? I mean, what is he got away, and
but I think in the context of a child in France like that, I think that was the best way to tell that story, and I appreciate that story was made that way, because it was really, if you haven't seen it, I mean, it's really an interesting movie, and it's totally different to anything you've seen. But that's childhood, and we can all sort of relate to that. I don't know if the plight of the sex worker is necessarily the same thing for me. I can see how it could be, but
I would say that for me, I mean, I liked Honora,
Yeah.
but I did feel, as you did, that it was too long. So
Yeah.
I thought it could easily have been trimmed,
But you would have kept the
and
action the
not
way it
hurt.
is. You would
I
have. Yeah.
probably, well, it isn't that I would have kept the action. It's that because I might not have ever made that
Yeah.
movie, but watching the movie, it her performance captivated me. I was interested in the performer
Sure.
and the person, and I was interested in her plight and her ability, and I was moved by the moment when she gives sex to the driver
Yeah.
as a gift
Yeah.
for him giving back the ring to her. I mean, in a way, she's kind of, all she's got. She has nothing else but sex, and it's
that's
not
funny.
like sex to her.
Yeah, you said
It's
about
not
sex.
like sex to her is a big deal.
You said something that I never actually looked at. I never saw it as that. So that puts a little more value.
It was just the
on
way
it
I
for me.
saw it. I'm just saying.
But that's a good interpretation. You see, you have
yeah.
a good eye for that stuff, and I think I totally overlooked that part because I think by that time I was a little bit annoyed
Yeah.
with the movie, and then it's like, okay, so she fucks the driver
Yeah.
and then cries. Great. Like, what did I learn from this experience? But I like that you took it a level deeper there, and yeah, it's her currency, and it's all she
she's
has.
got. That's all she's got to give him, and she gives him a gift.
That's very complex.
And then but I mean,
yeah.
I mean, and the crying isn't so much because she gave, she had sex with the guy. It's because, she had. It's almost like the shame that she feels for having imagined that this thing could have even been real. That this could have been. She thought for a moment that maybe this relationship is going to change my life, and of course it's not.
I do feel. I did feel for her on that.
Yeah. Anyway, no, but I mean, we all look at movies differently, and we look at them. I mean, I know I sit down with my sons. They are more. I mean, they themselves are different too, but they tend to like not necessarily the same kinds of things I do, and I'm moved by subtlety. Not to say that they aren't also, but they also like a lot of action, and they like a lot of other things that I'm okay with, but it doesn't matter that much to me. So that's about taste.
Well, you've introduced, I mean, to me, it's always the same thing. I don't seek things out, but when I see a good film, I appreciate it too. And that's, we talk about this a million times. I would have never gone to see Francis.
Yeah, no, I understand.
Or
that.
Without
no,
Limits.
Or probably any of those.
But they're amazing movies.
Look, you're not my audience. I'm sorry.
I am though. After when you sit my ass down and you're like, listen, watch the story.
That's why we're here talking.
Yeah.
I'm trying to have you come see my movies, which you wouldn't normally see.
Exactly.
I will go see anything you tell me. You asked me to see.
And I know that and appreciate that. And I actually, you're the reason I even watched the 400 Blows in the first place, and even started looking into movies like that.
Well, to wrap this up, I mean, I want to get back to documentaries. I mean, the fact is, you make documentaries. You made a great documentary that I saw, not the one you mentioned, but another one.
Yeah.
And it was very, very strong, very moving, very personal to some extent, I would think.
Yeah.
And I happen to like those kinds of stories very much, and I'm hoping that I have the opportunity to be involved in a few of those too. For me, it's very, very, very hard for me to make a feature because it takes so much energy and resources and people and a whole lot of things. To do a documentary, for me, is easier. It's not easier. The subject isn't easier. The process isn't easier. But the resources are smaller, and you can do it over a longer period of time.
And it's not as committal, like, is this in the can?
I can get an interview tomorrow. I can get it next week. I don't have to do it in 10 days or 50 days or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And so there is a kind of a pleasure to watching something evolve that way. And I'm enjoying that process now. I'm not suggesting that it's going to take over from the other side of me that still wants to make feature films, but it certainly is a very worthy endeavor, and I like the process. I like what comes out of it.
And I think this is a good note to kind of wrap everything up on, and just kind of say that, I saw an interview where Tarantino was saying, I've always said I'm only going to make 10 movies, and then it's like, okay, well, what's after your 10th movie? He wants to go into Broadway and stuff. And so
Really?
So that'll be interesting, Tarantino Broadway plays. But what I think is interesting here, or important to remember as a storyteller, is that sometimes I think we get fixated on the medium itself, and it's like when I came to LA, my thing was always feature films are the holy grail. That's the only measure of success.
Sure.
I don't think that's true, and not anymore, especially because
I completely agree.
it's great to make a feature, but you can tell stories in so many different ways now. Even on social media, you can come up with your own ways to tell stories.
Sure.
It could even be a hybrid between a documentary.
No, it's true.
There are no rules to this.
I know so many people who came to Hollywood around the time I did in the 70s who were, TV snobs. Television? No, I'm not doing television. I'm only doing feature films.
Yeah.
These same producers, they weren't producers then, but they are now, are all in on television now.
Right.
And they if you would remind them of the fact that they felt there was a real difference between television and features, they would probably forget that they actually said that. But that was the prevailing thing. Even for actors, there were actors who worked, we've talked about this too, actors who only wanted to work in features. I don't want to do television. I don't do television.
Right.
It's like saying I don't do advertisements.
Right.
I only do art.
Right. Until
Which is
Nescafe
nonsense.
comes along and says, how
Yeah.
about $7 million a year for coming down once a year to the studio and saying Nescafe's good?
Well, that's too, and think of some of the art and some of the ads that you've seen.
Yeah. I think
Some of
ads
the
are...
best art.
I think some of the best storytellers come from advertising, and here's why. Not best storytellers
Yeah.
overall, but like... Now it's a bit different. You have more time because the 30-second window is kind of changing. But when you see a really good TV ad, 30-second TV ad, there are every once in a while an ad that makes you laugh or emotional or something, that's really hard to do when you think about it. You have to sell a product and make it an emotional arc and get through to the viewer to not only pay attention to it, but also like the product, but also be moved by it in 30 seconds. If you can do that, you're
that's a
you're
pretty
damn good filmmaker.
I completely agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know what you were saying about TV now? This is the attitude people have towards YouTube and kind of this stuff. And I think they're looking at like YouTube is not legit or whatever, but at the same time, when I had a little narrative short that I almost didn't want to put up suddenly have 200 million views, that sort of changes the perspective on, wow, I can make a 2-minute video and 200 million people are going to see that. That's more than any movie's ever going to be, audience-wise
That's right.
for somebody like me, at least now.
No, it's
So
very true.
go with what you can do.
Yeah.
Right. All right, cool.
Hey, pal, thank you.
Hey, this turned into an interesting one.
Good.
Not at all what I expected.